Good evening and welcome to Career Week, everyone. My name is Natalie Guerra, and I am the president for the University of Maryland's Latinx Alumni Network. We are excited that you are able to join us for today's session, Careers with a Worldwide Impact. This session is brought to you by the Latinx Alumni Network as part of the Alumni Association's Career Week, a week-long virtual event series to help alumni like you conquer, steer, and advance your career. This webinar will be recorded. By participating, you acknowledge and consent to your image, likeness, or voice being recorded. And thank you so much to everyone who is participating in our poll. Ligia, to you, thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining this event. Today, we'll be listening to three experts who will provide us some insights on careers in international development and foreign affairs. They will discuss the different global opportunities available and their experience in the field. Please feel free to send any questions that you have to our chat, or you can also raise your hand and ask a question as we progress during this discussion. I will introduce each one of our special guests. The first one is Isabel Romero. She is a security program officer in the Department of State. She implements policy standards and provides management oversight for local guard programs at different embassies. She has supported programs in Bolivia, Costa Rica, Peru, Canada, Afghanistan, Dominican Republic, Guyana, Honduras, among other countries. She started her career as an intern at the Foreign Service Institute. And one thing to note is that she's the president of the Hispanic Employee Council of Foreign Affairs Agencies, working on recruitment, retention, and promotion of Hispanics. We welcome Isabel. Our next guest is Jose Pineda. He's a senior advisor at DAPTEC Systems with vast experience on macroeconomic fiscal frameworks. He has supported projects in Puerto Rico, Saudi Arabia, Venezuela, Indonesia, Kyrgyzstan, the Indo-Pacific region, among other areas. He has also worked at the United Nations on green economy and the Human Development Report. Prior to joining DAPTEC, he was a professor at the School of Business at the University of British Columbia. We welcome Jose. And our final guest is Karen Guzman. She was a Peace Corps volunteer living 2 years in Mozambique. She served as a health service promoter supporting youth development, HIV, malaria programs, specifically among women, adolescents, and adolescents. She previously worked at the Partners of America supporting youth programs and managed grassroots volunteer networks. And she's passionate about grassroots social justice, working with youth, empowering women. And she's currently working as a parent and community organizer at the PG County Educators Association. We welcome Karen. Okay, after giving a brief introduction to each one of our panelists who have had a lot of experience in international development and foreign affairs, we will go ahead and have a conversation with them with the different topics, and they will share their insights in this field so that you can learn more about what is it to be part of this or taking this career path. So I will ask a question, and our three panelists will provide insights on each of the questions as we progress. And if someone has a question, please feel free to add it to the chat or to raise your hand, and you can ask a question to one of the panelists or all of the panelists. So the first one is, we can go ahead and start with Isabel. Can you please share why you chose a career in foreign affairs, and can you please share your experience?
Hi, thank you so much for having me today. My name is Isabel Romero. I am working at the Department of State. I have been here for about 8 years now. I currently work as a security program analyst. I cover countries in the Western Hemisphere, and it's all in my bio, the countries that I cover, but I started as an unpaid intern, as they've said, as part of my bio. The reason why I got into foreign affairs is I started with an unpaid internship. I did an internship, loved it, got hooked at the first start. I met foreign service officers that were super intelligent, really great to work with. And at the time, I was hooked. I said, I'm going to join the Foreign Service, and that is going to be the career for the rest of my life. And then as I stayed at the State Department, I realized my needs kind of changed. I got married. I have a husband now, and I get to do a really good work. And I also get to travel as part of my job. So my needs kind of change, but I still do foreign affairs work. And it's really interesting. I'm in the security field. So the Department of State has a law enforcement arm of the State Department called Diplomatic Security. I worked for them, so I help with embassy security overseas. And then previously I worked in consular affairs, and I've also worked at the Foreign Service Institute, which is where we train our diplomats to go overseas and do the best job that they can. So I got into it because of the internship, and then I got hooked, and I stayed in it ever since.
Okay, so we can go ahead with Jose. Can you please tell us why you joined the international development field, and tell us your experience about
I guess mostly because of my own background. No? I'm a Venezuelan citizen. Yes, and I'm a Venezuelan citizen, so I think that I've seen firsthand the need and the challenges for working on development, and I think the motivation started also when I was doing my PhD at University of Maryland, knowing that I could apply the tools and the skills I was acquiring at the university to promote policy change and better policy making, not only in my country, but I have been lucky enough to work all over the world. So in that sense, I feel that I have been lucky to devote my skills and my training to my passion, which is trying to help better policy making in the developing countries. So it has been kind of a and the opportunity to be able to do it for so many years. So I'm lucky in that sense.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Karen, so would you please tell us why did you join the Peace Corps, and what's been your experience working in international development on that side?
Of course. First of all, thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here with you all tonight. I really started my career in international development because I minored in international development and conflict management at the University of Maryland, College Park. And so I had excellent professors that were really invested in allowing us to see all of the different fields, right? And even just hearing the experiences of Isabel and Jose, we see that there's so many ways that you can get involved in international development, and it's not one fits all. You know, you can do policy, you can be hands-on grassroots, you can do the statistical, right, more research aspect of it all. And so for me, it was just being involved and having some amazing classes where we were able to go to New York and go to the United Nations and just see, you know, what else is out there, what other organizations are out there, all types, right, like grassroots, but also these larger organizations that are well known all around the world. And specifically, I wanted to work in Latin America because I was born in Bolivia. My parents are from Bolivia. And so I had this love for going back to Latin America and just contributing and serving people outside of the US. And so for me, I was looking specifically for organizations that focused on Latin America. And that's how I came across Partners of the Americas. And they do a plethora of projects from youth development to agriculture to security issues. And so there I really started my career. And because it was a small nonprofit, I was able to wear many hats and get involved in so many different areas. While I was working there, half of the staff were returned Peace Corps volunteers. And so everybody told me, you know, how transformative that experience was for them and how they still stayed in touch with their host families and, you know, just how much it impacted their lives. And so I was constantly hearing that as I was working there. And so that experience of listening to their stories, their testimonies, and then looking into the program, right? It's very seldom that you find a program where you're able to volunteer abroad for free, right? Like usually you pay. And so this was an experience that they were paying for you. The government was paying for you in this case, and you were able to learn a new language, actually live with local communities, right? And so all of that sounded really appealing to me. And I actually didn't choose Mozambique. Mozambique chose me, as I like to say. And it was a magical experience because I didn't know what I was getting myself into. This was my first time sort of going into another area that was outside of Latin America, but through that experience, I learned so much from that as well. And I know we're going to talk about other things later on, but so I'll stop there.
Great, thank you for your insights on what it's been and why you chose the career path. So our next question is if you can provide us the skill sets that are needed to get into this field. Maybe we can go and start now with Jose.
Thank you, Lydia. I think to me, since my angle, my motivation has been mostly to do policy work, I think I feel the responsibility to have the best possible skills to understand the topics and to provide the best scientific evidence that we could have to make decisions that could be, better informed by data, by evidence. So in that sense, for me, I think that was when I took the decision to do the PhD in economics. I knew that if I want to do seriously policy, and it doesn't have to be a PhD for everyone, but to me, the decision was I wanted to have the best possible skills and tools that I need. So if I need to understand modeling, I need to understand statistics, I need to understand how to interpret and how to get the best evidence for me to inform when I make a decision about what policies could be adopted. And I think that was an important decision that I made because at the time that I was finishing my undergrad, I entered to work in a consultant firm that we were doing work to advise a government. So all of a sudden it hits me that I was doing work that may have implications significant. So in that sense, that's what I took the decision. No, if I really want to do this, I will want to get the best possible set of skills. And I was lucky enough to find the University of Maryland as my home to give me all of that knowledge. So to me was that I feel that whatever you want to do, try to get the best kind of tools that you want. And sometimes, at least in my experience, we have a lot of courses that you think or you assume that you will not use, but believe me, they will come to you handy the least moment that you expected, so that you pay attention to every single of your classes, every single of your courses, because that will be part of your toolbox going forward to the field, going forward to your desk if you do this job. But I think the university is giving you your tools, and that's what you have to use to do your work as effective as possible.
Thank you, Jose. Karen, can you provide us what are the skill sets that are needed to join international development?
Sure. So for me, I'm going to talk about this as both working at Partners, but also the Peace Corps. I think initially for Partners of the Americas, I was first hired to do youth development work. And what really brought that passion was because I was a student organizer at the University of Maryland. And that passion of organizing and building coalitions and alliances among different student organizations, and really listening to what are the community needs. I think in international development, there's a lack of representation of people of color, right? And so we, as Jose mentioned, he's from Venezuela, I'm from Bolivia, like we have that experience of living in quote unquote developing countries, right? And really knowing that we need to serve the community and we need to understand that all of the things that we want to do abroad through international development, through projects, has to come from the community and has to serve them in the best possible way, and that the community needs to be involved in every step of the way, right? And so I think listening is a core skill, just really observing, listening, asking questions, right? Like, who is this serving? Why is this serving this community in this way? Why is the funding going to this and not this? A lot of the times in the work that I was doing at Partners, we would get large sums of money, and it would just be up to us to really develop a plan, right? A strategic plan on how to implement that and what partners we wanted to work with. And there's a lot of analysis that goes into that. There's a lot of strategic thinking that goes into that, into making sure that we know that we're serving the right people and that the people on the ground in these communities are the right people doing, to be able to do that work. And so there's a lot of that involved. I would say for the Peace Corps, it's very interesting because people do the Peace Corps at different levels in their lives. And so even in my cohort, we had people who were almost retired. And so they have all this experience. They've worked for many years in different fields, and now they're able to sort of implement that in the work that they're doing in the Peace Corps. And then we have some people who are recent undergrad or recent graduates. And so they're just sort of figuring it out and implementing, whatever it is that they learned through their undergraduate experience or graduate experience. And so for me, I was really intentional about making sure that I did Peace Corps at a later part of my life, when I felt that I had a lot of skills that I could offer whatever community that I was placed in. And I think just being conscious of the fact that it's very seldom that people would be able to do the reverse here, right? That someone who doesn't have an experience or a degree or something like that would be able to offer the services that we offered abroad. So I was really conscious of that privilege that we had as Americans to all of a sudden be in spaces that even locals weren't in, right? Just because we were coming from America and we had this label of Peace Corps volunteer. And so I think that's very important as well in these spaces, is to acknowledge our privilege. But I would say that in the Peace Corps, the biggest skill that I used was, again, observing, listening to my community, doing my part to really understand where the community was coming from, just basic things like even making sure that I knew some of the basic language, right, from my community, that they could feel like they could trust me. I think when you're on the ground and you're doing grassroots work like the Peace Corps, there's a level of trust that is not easy to acquire for development to be successful. And I think that's something we don't really talk about, but a lot of these skills are just humanity, right? Like as a human being, just being empathizing to the concerns of the community, being strategic, listening, observing, taking notes, bringing people together, making those connections. I think those are some of the best skills that I learned and that allowed me to succeed in those fields.
Great, thank you, Karen. Isabella, can you please share with us what are the skills that you need to join foreign affairs?
Sure. So a couple of things come to mind. They're not too different from stuff that Karen has actually already mentioned. The biggest thing for me is interpersonal skills, developing relationships with people. So, and no matter what job you work in with foreign affairs, you're always dealing with people from different cultures, different backgrounds, different perspectives. And when we talk about diversity, we don't talk about just race and ethnicity. Sometimes it's where they're growing up. It's what the lens that they bring to the table from what they've lived like their whole lives, right? So understanding other people is huge. Customer service is really big. And if you're not willing to listen to people, it's harder to come to an agreement on certain things or work through problems together. So interpersonal skills are huge. I started my first job, I worked in restaurants, and it's so interesting because that type of work, being on a customer service side, is really interesting to bring into foreign affairs, because you're always thinking of how you're being perceived, how you come off, and also how do you get to a solution. Because if someone's not happy with their food, you still have to be nice to them. You still have to do certain things to make them happy as a customer. And even if you don't agree with someone, even in foreign affairs, you still have to come to a resolution, or at least at a level where you can agree to something, right? So interpersonal skills are really big. I think that comes really naturally to Latinos in general. We're very warm people. We reach out to people. We're bubbly by nature. Some of us are not bubbly, but even then we listen. We know how to listen to people, listen to others. So that's the biggest one that comes to mind. Another thing is being flexible and like kind of able to roll with the punches. So I think coming back from different cultures, it's a little easier to be flexible because you're used to being put into situations you're not really comfortable in. And in my day job, every day is something different. I'm always thrown a different problem and like kind of have to work through it. I may not have the answers, but if I know the right people that know the answers, it's easier for me to provide a solution to whoever's trying, needs something. Even today, I was on the other end of a call we spoke to a couple of countries countries overseas and they're working through requests for funding. And, they think one way, and then we've said something and maybe it doesn't translate the exact way, and having to take a couple steps back. Maybe English is not their first language. Maybe it was confusing on how it was conveyed. So starting from the beginning of the conversation to backing up a little bit, well, maybe you misunderstood what I was trying to come across. Let's explain it again. Let's explain it in a way that makes sense to them. So that those like problem solving skills are always really great. Being flexible, interpersonal skills. Another really big one is your writing skills, which you guys learn in college all the time. What's interesting is when you get into the government, a lot of the writing is a lot more concise. So getting across your point in a very short manner, as opposed to like these essays that you have to write in undergrad or graduate school where they want you to like elongate every point, go really into research, into depth. It doesn't really apply when it comes to memos and writing foreign policy paper. A lot of people have very limited time because they're working on so many issues. You have to be pretty concise in how you're writing. And that was something that I just had to learn, because sometimes I go into this long-winded explanation. I tell you every reason from A to Z as to why something happened. They really don't care. They want to know the top line issues. And can you get it across in a concise way and in a quick way, because people don't have the time to kind of delve into issues one by one because they have so much going on. So those are kind of things that I think that like our community draws really naturally to, because we know how to relate to people, and that can benefit you in any job that you choose, not just foreign affairs or the federal agency in the private sector. It's really applicable.
Thank you. And I think that what you mentioned about having the skills of being able to engage with different communities, because it's like working in international development, you have to know how to address different people. The way that you talk to them, it can be understood in a different way. And that's very important when we're talking across borders. So our next question is, what are the pros and challenges that you've encountered in your field? And we can go ahead and start with Karen.
Sorry, it was muted. I would say that the pros are just sort of what you just mentioned, Ligia. Learning about different cultures, I think, is the beautiful thing of working in international development. And if you're lucky to travel, that was my favorite part of the job, right? Was traveling to different places, meeting different people, just broadening my horizons in that sense, and building relationships with people that have lasted throughout the years. And I think that another thing that I really enjoyed is sort of like what Isabel said, learning to be flexible. And that comes with having a broader, right, understanding of different cultures. But I think that has served me so well, just to be flexible, just to be easily adaptable in different scenarios, in different situations. I really enjoyed using that, throughout, even now as an organizer, right? Those are applicable skills. And I would say the things that I think are difficult in this field, again, going back to the lack of diversity. I mean, our field, this field is predominantly white, right? Like that's the reality of the situation. You go to DC, you go to New York, you go to these offices, and even the diplomats, and it's mostly male led, right? It's really hard for women in some of these spaces to be in because of, maybe have a family. It's not easy to do, right? If you have a family or things like that. And so for me, that was something that was a little bit of a shocker, because I thought like, oh, international development, we're dealing with all these different cultures, but then here in the US, it's really white led, and there is that lack of diversity. But I think as the years are going on, we are doing, there's a lot more outreach. Like I love that Isabel is a part of that Hispanic association at the Department of State, because we need more representation and we need more different perspectives to the table. And so I think that's really important. And in terms of the Peace Corps, I would say that some of the things that, again, I loved were building relationships, meeting people, being able to live within the community. I think that's really rare that you're able to do that in any program, and really understand what that dynamic looks like. But in terms of the challenges, again, I think there's a lack of understanding of, there's still like an old school mentality of how international development is led, in that here's a bunch of money, we're going to give it to Americans to do what they want to do abroad without having that understanding. And it can lead to, right, neocolonialism if we don't understand that we need to empower the community, that the community needs to lead these projects and initiatives on their own, and that they need to tell us what are the things that are going to be useful for them. And so it can't just be like top down, we know better than you do in your own countries, in your own communities. So that's something that I think if you're planning on being a Peace Corps volunteer, really analyzing how that can be detrimental to the community that you think you want to serve ultimately.
Thank you, Karen. Jose, can you provide us the pros and challenges that you've encountered in international development?
Yes, and you know, I just because of age, I have a kind of a long career of different areas. So I've been working on development in a development bank in Latin America, mostly going the core of the Andean countries, but in general Latin American countries. And then since 2009, I've been also working with the UN. So it has opened, you know, different aspects, and going to Africa or going to Asia and these kind of things that the top, you see that when you are able to have, and going back to a little bit of the previous question, maybe not, I don't think these are skills or qualifications, but there are things that we need to have. And I could see from my colleagues at the panel, you need to care a lot. And I think you have to have empathy. So you really, really need to put yourself in the shoes of whatever you are interacting. So in that sense, I think if you really want to do this, I think you should ask yourself, do I care enough? Why? Because it's hard work. If you want to do it right, you have to really, really work a lot. But I think to me, the most important pro has been to see the impact, to see that you could change, that you could contribute, that you belong to a cause that is larger than you, so that you belong to a good cause. I think to me, this is the most gratifying aspect of working in international development, that you could really see that maybe, you know, we all see the news, no? So we all know that everything looks like it's going bad, but then all of a sudden you have this anchor that you pass what I call the test of waking up and you want to go to your job. So if you really are, you know, engaged and you are seeing that your job has an impact, that you could change and improve somebody's life, and a community or a country or a municipality, depending on the scale that you're working. But if you see that you can do that, then believe me that the whole set of problems that you see out there seem smaller, you put things in perspective and you feel good about it. So I think that sense of belonging to something larger and a good cause, I think is what has been the greatest gratification for me to be involved in international development. I will say that the challenges that Karen was mentioning, I think she's absolutely right, because we see that the agenda of development is dominated by people that may not even know what is not being developed. And that's a fact, and particularly at least in most of what I have done in my career lately in the UN system, where there is a lot of donors. And the word donor has an implication that is important. And I guess that's a significant challenge. There is, and I don't say this as something that is bad. There is a little bit of sometimes too much politics involved in some of these processes. And that's something that you just have to learn how to navigate. I think I like when Isabel says that you have to learn through the punches. So you have to overcome these things, but it's important for people to acknowledge that sometimes if you choose either the very nice path that Isabel or Karen has chosen, will have also pros and cons, and Isabel, of course, will talk about hers. We already listened to Karen's, and I will say mine was most of the time seeing that the consequence of this lack of representation was sometimes that we didn't see enough let's say, caring. We didn't see enough like empathy, that why do I want to impose something on a community? Why don't I, as Karen said, why do I listen to them first? So I think, to me, this is a little bit of frustration that we need to, just overcome, learn how to deal with it, and always contribute a little bit, so that you say, well, there is a problem, but if you add to the solution, I think that also will make you feel a little bit better. So that to me has been one of the most gratifying things. I'm lucky enough to be a macroeconomist. So when I entered to a problem, we advised a complete country. We changed the finances of a country. So recently, for instance, just to put a small example where we all feel really, really great, the company that I'm working now, we are advisors of the Puerto Rican government. And throughout that process, we were able to create all the macroeconomic forecasts, the fiscal accounts. And recently we saw that all that effort pay off for an important debt negotiation that implies a significant debt reduction for Puerto Rico. So in that sense, you feel good that, yes, all that hard work that you have done and all this struggle has a payoff, because eventually that solution will lead to better outcomes for that community. So I stop here to listen to what Isabel has to say.
Thank you, Jose. So Isabel, if you can share with us your pros and challenges in foreign affairs.
Sure. Okay, so the pros are really easy because I love my job, because I love learning. I feel like I'm in a constant state of learning. Every day is different. I love the people. They're super interesting, different backgrounds. I mean, if you can imagine, foreign service officers are traveling all over the world. Even people that work domestically, they're working on really interesting issues. So even if they're not a foreign affairs officer that moves every 2 or 3 years, if they work in the civil service, which is more of our DC-based colleagues, they still work on super interesting issues. So I'm always constantly learning. That part is really great. Work with great people. I've always gone from office to office and found people that I can connect with. But to Karen's point, and I think I have the same point she has, it can get really lonely being the only person in the room. So often I'm the only female in the room. I'm often the only woman of color. It can get very lonely. It causes you to second guess yourself. If you don't see people in senior leadership positions that look like you question whether you can get to that position, right? And they always say, be the change you wish to see, but like, that's also hard to see if you can't see the people that look like you above you. And that's why I shared the TED Talk, because it made me kind of like open up my perspective on this, because even if you don't see those people at the top, that doesn't mean you can't be that person for other people that are coming behind you. And so for me, the really fulfilling part of my career and why I love coming to speak to students is like, you guys are our next generation, and us being here to support you, it really gives me the energy to kind of go back into the workforce and like ensure that our workforce becomes more diverse, so that when you enter it, it doesn't look like how it looks like for us. And when I do stuff for HECFA, the Hispanic Employee Council for Foreign Affairs Agencies, our whole thing is to recruit, promote, and retain Hispanics and Latinx in foreign affairs. And even though we have small numbers now, we want to create diversity where we don't see it at the current table. And you guys are the next generation. We want you in these careers. And at the State Department, you literally can come into any job, like work on your undergrad degree can literally be on any topic, and I can find an office that relates to that experience. And so, pulling people from different backgrounds all over the United States, different perspectives, like you will create a stronger democracy for the United States. And so it's just very important to kind of build the next generation up. And that's why I love coming to work. But like what Karen's point is, I mean, it's just, being in a male dominated society or an organization, and my organization specifically, I'm in law enforcement, right? So I did my undergrad in global affairs. And then when I did my master's at George Mason, I did it in international security. And I did an international security because I went to like one of those mock sessions where you kind of like jump into some policy issues, and I got hooked. But I didn't come from a security background. I don't have a military background. I have no security background, but here I am. I studied it in academia, and now I am applying it to my job, and it's very different than what I studied. And traditionally in a security realm, it's a lot of military. So in my office, if I literally look around, I have one other woman of color. There are other females. I am one of 2 females though that, represents diversity in any aspect. And then everyone else is male, and they're all coming from the military, the veterans preference, people coming out, like we thank for them for their service, but we're not getting the diversity we need because there are some systemic barriers in the hiring process. And so I'm kind of one of those that like, we're trying to break the mold and like making sure that we get different type of people at the table. And then even going so far as to what I'm leading now. So I lead, over 600 members in the association that I'm in now, and they all are struggling to get to the top. They all have similar issues, but I'm also still like the only contractor to ever have held this role. We started in 1982. I'm only the second female to hold this position. And I take all of that really strongly because I feel passionately about it. I didn't see people that look like me taking the position, even though I could have spent time doubting myself before I applied to be in this role. I competed against foreign service officers that out tenured me and that were male and that they were higher ranking. And you know what? I was like, I feel passionately about this. I've been dedicating several years to this, and I didn't let it hold me back. So all that to say, like, you guys can be the change that we don't have now. And that's why we're all here. We're here to encourage you and empower you.
Great, thank you, Isabel. Thank you all for all your insights of the challenges and pros that you face in your field. I think we have received some questions from our participants. Natalie, if you have them, and you want to share them with our panelists.
Yes, certainly. And thank you to our panelists for such, great information provided to all of our attendees. So this question goes for Jose Pineda. What skills could be transferred for those that are already in the field?
I like this something that was said before. We are, I think was Isabel, if I remember correct, we're always learning. So I think the thing is, it's just the attitude that we can always make a change. And something that, for instance, I love about my work at the UN. 5 years ago, I moved to working in Paris at a UN environment. And I was 40 plus in those years, and I choose to learn French. So, and it's tough, believe me, it's tough to learn any language when you barely know your own. And then learning French at that age. And it was like, yes, I wanted to do it. Today, to keep up with changes and learning coding, to keep up with the younger generations that are doing things in Python and R. Well, I'm more working on other softwares that are Stata and eViews. But if I want to be your boss of the younger generation, I have to know what you are doing. So it's always a little bit tough, but it's also gratifying. So I think, to me, the most important thing is that don't think that it's impossible to acquire the skills. There is a lot of executive programs up there. There are a lot of courses that you could do, even online nowadays that, the pandemic just accelerated all the online education that we could get. So to me, it's more keep this intellectual curiosity that you want to improve yourself. You want to change what you have. Some people that I work with also have different backgrounds. Some of them are less quantitative, some of them are even more, and each one has something to balance. So the people, for instance, that are a lot of quantitative in my team, I need to teach them what Karen says, these soft skills, because they need those. It's not just ones and zeros. They need to understand that behind that 1 and 0, there is a human being. So we need to care about that particular subject. Or the people that may, be hiding from mathematics or statistics, and they want not to see them. I just, encourage them. Okay, there are steps that we can do. So I think, to me, the most important is that, as we heard from other panelists, we're always learning, and we have to keep this curiosity that we can do better, that we can learn something new, and we will be amazed for the things that we can do. We just need to confront this fear. Believe me, it's always the biggest fight is inside ourselves, that we think we cannot do it, that we think that we don't deserve it, that we think that we do not imagine that change. And I think, to me, it's just doing breaking the ice and doing this first step. And if you do baby steps, you will see that at the end, you will arrive whatever you want to arrive.
Thank you, Jose. And I think something important to mention is that international development and foreign affairs, it has like a wide range of areas that are supported. And there are programs in education, there are programs in public finance management, agriculture, policy. It's like any field that you would want to, like, it's, the idea is like working in different areas that any like country it requires. So the interest is like, if the person is interested in going into international development, but if you have like passion for education or interest on policy and things like that, those are things that could be carried over to international development work. And then that's how you can enter this field. If you don't have like a background on international studies or anything related to that as a bachelor's degree. So I don't know if there are any other questions from our participants or if that's all that we've received for now.
There was a hand raised from Wendy Villalta. If you wanted to go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question. I think we have lost her.
I just admitted her. I think she was having connection issues, I think.
Yeah.
While we wait for her to join, we do have a question from Katarina Witt. Question for Karen. Do you have an example of how you saw neocolonialism in the Peace Corps? And are there organizations that operate like the Peace Corps, but are more culturally aware and inclusive?
Yes, thank you so much for that question, Katarina. So a perfect example is I was actually in this cohort of the Peace Corps that got evacuated worldwide because of COVID. So we all had to leave our sites, and an example is that in the Peace Corps, there's grants, right? Like there's money for projects that you're able to do in your community with counterparts, which are local members of your community, people from that country, from that community. And so I had submitted an awesome project with my counterpart, and we talked about wanting to do this program called Grassroots Soccer, which was using soccer as a tool to teach community about HIV, malaria, gender inequality, right, like domestic violence. And we had won a grant. And then when we left, this was like maybe 2 weeks right before we get the announcement that we have to leave our sites. And so when we get that announcement, I talked to, the Peace Corps staff, and I'm like, hey, we won this grant. My counterpart is ready to go. He's super excited. We have a team. We had the whole project like planned out and everything. Is it okay, right, if they continue with the funding and the project? And they're like, no. You are leaving, and so the funding is tied to you being a Peace Corps volunteer, and because you're leaving, the funding is no longer going to be available in your community, or basically the project wasn't able to be done. And so that's a prime example, right, of neocolonialism, is this idea of like giving this money to someone who's not from this community and embedding that into a community and just making it dependent on the fact that we are from America or we're white or whatever. Like, there's the whole conversation also in international development about the white savior complex. And so all of these things are tied. And that was a prime example. And it was just like a very shocking example of how development needs to change. But looking at the positive side, I have a really, really good friend of mine. Her name is Ileana Valle, and I'm going to share her organization in the chat with you all if you want to take a look at it. But she is one of the co-founders of this organization called Equanimity. And so what she's doing and what she's trying to do is use a different perspective to international development. And she's a Latina. She was born in El Salvador. Her other co-founders also Latina Salvadoreña. And they're looking at international development through a more inclusive, right, sustainable way of just doing this, and using different practices that they learned by being usually, like we've heard in the panel, like one of the only women of color in these spaces. And so what they're trying to do is super bold and new and innovative and brave, because it's something that hasn't been done. But you know, one of the struggles that we're seeing is that there's a lack of funding, there's a lack of support, because this is not, you know, the norm in international development. But I think that as there's more people like us in this field, and as we're rising up and we're providing new examples of what international inclusive and sustainable international development looks like, I'm really hopeful that this career and this field is going to change and provide more of those perspectives. But I am, you know, when she started this organization, it really did bring me a lot of hope, and they've won some great projects. They're doing some great things in El Salvador, for instance, right now with local community members, specifically around youth development and bringing in all members of community, right? Like, as a lot of people might know, El Salvador is currently, you know, a lot of the grants that are going to El Salvador specifically related to prevent like gang influence. And so they work with gang members in innovative ways, right, to support the community. And so I highly encourage you all to check it out. I'm going to put it in the chat, but thank you for that question.
Thank you, Karen. And this is a question from someone in the chat that says, oh, more of a recommendation or for advice. I don't have any direct connections to DC or government. How can I enter this space without a network to help me access it? So if anyone from our panel would like to answer, please feel free.
Well, I just wanted to say, you already have a couple of things in the chat that you could apply. So I think where the intention of the organizers was not only for us to share kind of our own experience, but also we have networks. And I think Isabel already put something. I said, yes, please check it out, our webpage, and apply to things that we may have open. So as part of my job at that tech, I'm also the social responsibility or corporate social responsibility officer of that tech. And I take seriously the idea that we need to promote inclusiveness and diversity in our workplace. We are lucky enough that our CEO is Latino, and that gave us a lot of room to, because it's not that we have this, we could see at the top of leadership what, you know, our faces, but I think is something that I just say that you don't need, at least from this event, to have connections. You just need to have your qualifications, your CV, and we will be more than happy to look at your curriculum and your application. So I think it is tough. I guess my point is that I didn't enter into international development by definition. For instance, I didn't choose to work on UN environment, but by a choice. But working on development, working on economics, I realized that we need to do something about the environment. We need to do something about transformation of our economies. And then by motivation, I entered into that field. I didn't know anyone back there or have a connection, but I guess it's just the invitation is to see, to give it a try, to apply. There are a lot of places, and now even remotely, we even have interns that they don't need to be on the DC area. So this is the perfect moment if you don't have connections, because then connections weigh less in this virtual world. You don't need to be in DC to do, you know, anything to work in DC. So I think this is a good moment. And please use all of these links that we are providing to you as a way to overcome some of those frictions and gaps that we all know exist.
Thank you, Jose. Isabel, I don't know if you have any other information that you can provide to our...
Yeah. Sure. I put a lot of stuff in the chat, but I think Jose is exactly right. So even if you don't have connections to people in DC, this is your connection, right? You're here, you made it here, you have access to all of us. The biggest thing is to follow up with your networking skills. So connecting with us on LinkedIn, finding people. So I think that the hard part is like knowing how to send like cold emails or like requests for like connecting with people. We got to break out of that. Okay. There are other people that have no qualms about sending a cold email or a LinkedIn request just so that they can connect with others. We are here as a community to support you. And so our connections are your connections. So by connecting with us, we can connect you with others. You don't have to be in the DC area. Like Jose said, we have a virtual federal student internship program. We placed about 2,000 students last year. You can be an intern working from Michigan and you can work for an embassy overseas. You can, intern with one of my friends on the call. She works for education and cultural affairs. You can intern with her office virtually from wherever you are. We found that with the pandemic, it caused us to be more agile. And now we have opportunities that can reach underrepresented students in any area of the world just by, nature of the fact that we all had to go virtual. So we actually gained a lot. Our students gained a lot because now that we're all virtual, you don't have to run from meeting to meeting. We can connect with you just like we're doing here. So I think the big thing is building up your networking skills. And then for me, another thing, which I didn't really learn in undergrad, is like creating a federal resume, at least for foreign affairs agencies. The resume process is not transparent. It's kind of hard to figure out. It's very, I'll say it's dull, but it's just very template language. Like there's a different structure to it. When I was an undergrad, I always thought you had to have like the prettiest resume. It had to be like 1 or 2 pages. It had to have a couple bullets. Maybe for the private sector that applies, but for federal agencies, it's a little bit different. They want you to expand on your skill set as much as possible. When you're applying to USA jobs, it's hitting a lot of keywords that are in the job descriptions. Security clearances is another thing. Getting a security clearance to work at a federal agency. I find that process is really opaque to some students. I'm actually working with an office right now to put out more marketing material on how to break through that process and debunk some myths that are out there. So I think networking is really big. Jose kind of touched on all of it. Maybe Karen has more, but I think you got a lot of it.
Yes, thank you. Karen, can you provide us any additional information on how?
I think everything was covered between Jose and Isabel. I will say the importance of LinkedIn. I just want to emphasize that because Isabel is so right. There's so many people who are unashamed and will send anything, right? And that's how it should be. It's a great online platform. It's accessible to everyone and we need to use it to the maximum. I mean, just to give you all an example, when I was trying to figure out what to do in international development and what sort of, what organizations to look at or what career paths to do, because as we've explored tonight, there's so many options. I would look at people's LinkedIn and see sort of their trajectory. Like, what did they study in undergrad? Did they get a master's? Like Jose, did they go to a PhD? Was that necessary, right? Where did they go? Did they career switch? Was there room for growth at the organization? You could see how many years they stayed, and even just reach out to them and say, hey, can I have a coffee? Can you do a Zoom chat? I'd love to ask you some questions about where you're at right now, or I'm looking at a job at this organization and I'd love to ask you some questions about it. And some people might say no, some people might not answer. It's okay. But there's a lot of people on LinkedIn that chances are you're going to find someone who says yes. So please don't underestimate that power of LinkedIn and just using it as a tool to get your questions answered and to find out more about opportunities.
Great, thank you. I think we have a question from Wendy. If you want to go ahead and ask your question, Wendy.
Yes. So my question is a little bit of complicated, but just to give some background, I graduated in 2019 and I did study international affairs with a focus in the Middle East. In college, there was this narrative where if you get good grades and you do your internships and you study abroad, basically you'll be able to stand out and get a great position. So that's exactly what I did. I did a lot of internships and think tanks, a lot of unpaid, career opportunities that I could do at that time. Once I graduated, I was at a financial point where I could no longer be part of those experiences that were unpaid, and navigating the entry-level job market for people that are interested in international affairs became very complicated. I applied to, I want to say, the top 15 think tanks in DC. I applied to a handful of consulting firms. And although, I had a great resume and great, experiences, I often would lose the job position, not due to any fault of mine, but because there's so much competition in DC. There's people that have masters or maybe even PhDs that are looking for these entry level positions. So to get to my point, what sort of advice would you give to someone to try to get back into this field of international affairs when that experience had been halted because of the reasons I just stated?
Thank you, Wendy, for your question. I don't know who would like to respond first to her question.
Let me give it a try. I think you are absolutely right to be, I will say it in these kind words, frustrated. It could be even more intense than that, but since we're recorded, let's keep it like this. I think the key, I guess, is take our word. I think what Isabel said, I felt it with true meaning. So apply to any of these things and friend us on LinkedIn, and we will make sure that we understand, we review your application. Sometimes what happens is that many times the people that review the applications, the technical people come late to the process, and you get discarded by people that have no technical skills for any reason that they randomly find. So I guess that now, if you apply to any of us, just even friend me on LinkedIn and say, Jose, I attended that UMD panel, and you told me to friend you. Well, take my word, and then I will make sure that your application get not discarded by any random reasons, and that you have a good and a fair shot to do this. I think, believe me, my view is that we Latinos compete really, really well when we get a fair shot. So our problem is not that. The problem is that sometimes we get discarded by reasons beyond our control, which are part of these biases that we talked previously. So I think that we just need to keep trying. I think, honestly, you will have a success story soon, but it's waiting for you to keep giving a little bit of additional push to that story. But that's waiting for you there. So write to us, and believe me, I think if it's not here, maybe we hear even people that may not be in my network, finding a position now, they will try to recommend it to another friend. So we talk to each other all the time and say, look, finding good talent is painful. So talking to you guys today is also a blessing for us, because then we could not only motivate you, but also benefit from good people that are out there looking for a chance. And we now take the opportunity to reach out to you. So I think this is both ways. I think for companies, for government officials, for NGOs, it's always a challenge to find highly motivated and talented people. So my advice, keep pushing, take advantage of at least these friendly faces that you see here. And I think your positive stories is just waiting to happen soon.
Thank you, Jose. Does anyone else want to add anything?
I can jump in. Wendy, first, thanks for your honesty. I know it's hard to also be vulnerable in spaces like this, and you're hitting up against some really hard issues. I think it's important to note that like some of these barriers that you mentioned are like not easy to overcome. And remember, like some of these systems are not built by people that look like us or for us. And so you're going up against some things that are beyond your control. And it's not easy to navigate in that kind of market, especially not knowing people that work directly for the government. So I know that it's hard to hear, like persistence is key, but I had a very similar question. We did a student foreign policy symposium back in October during Hispanic Heritage Month to try to get more students to apply to jobs at state. And I had someone that literally worked at the United Nations, had her master's degree, has done everything right. She's applied to the Foreign Service test. She's super competitive candidate, hasn't been able to get a job. And, you know, it's hard hearing these stories because we're begging for talent just like yours. And I think that the important thing is like what Jose was saying is creating this network of support systems, because when we find jobs, like I literally make it my like goal that if somebody comes to me with something and a problem and they're willing to listen and provide that support and follow up, it's not just that first time look, right? It's not just that first LinkedIn request, but also following up to develop a connection with someone. I will find something for them, whether it's with me or with my network. And so these people, we're placed here for a reason. I really do think that like you being on this call is like, it's for a reason, and we're here to find something for you. And even if you haven't been successful in the past, like you're still a really competitive candidate. And it just might be that the timing hasn't been right. So like keep applying, keep like trying to network. I just think it's really important for you to be persistent, only because, you know, I lucked into the position that I'm in now. And I hear it from so many Latinos that it was by luck. They met the right person. They were at a party. Somebody mentioned it to them. And it shouldn't be that way. It should be really targeted, right? The recruitment should be easy. It should be easy to find students like you. But the reality is we haven't caught up to what we want to shape our organizations to be. And it's a matter of time. I see the diversity efforts that are in place now to try to get students to the table, and it'll still take years even after those are put in place. So I know it's hard to hear that, but we're really here to support you. So please reach out.
Thank you, Isabel. Karen, do you want to share anything?
Yeah, I just want to add, I mean, everything that Isabel and Jose said is excellent, and I highly echo those words. I will say that there's a lot of groups also on Facebook, specifically for people of color, and I'm going to try to look at them up when I pause to see if I can link them in the chat, but there's a lot of ways that you can get job opportunities, specifically in international development. So also look at that. There's also boards on LinkedIn. So just do some research too. There's now, you know, more groups that are catered to people supporting people of color. And so that's also something, and I'm going to try to link them in the chat for you.
Thank you. I think something to add on that is that we normally tend to think about like the big organizations that work in international development and the big organizations that are out there that have been going on for years. But there are also smaller organizations that support international development or foreign affairs that sometimes we tend not to explore, and maybe sometimes it's a good place where you can start, because when you work in smaller organizations, because there's less staff, you get to learn about multiple things on how to work on like these topics, because you are asked to support, like when you need to do a budget, or when you need to do technical work, or if you need to write something. So it's always good also to explore that the smaller organizations, because they often offer good opportunities also as a starting point.
Ligia, if may add very quickly, because I think you touched in a point that, look, at least my experience, the default is that people think that we're less, that you don't have enough. And what you need is to break the ice, to enter into an organization, then you can prove yourself. So what Ligia is telling you, find a way to get, even if it's less known organization, but after people start knowing your work will be your reputation. So you just need to break the ice, particularly those first jobs, that are really critical, that people always ask you to have all of this experience before getting a job, but then how can you get the experience if nobody gives you the opportunity? So breaking that kind of vicious cycle that drives everybody crazy, I think is critical. And once that happens, my best advice is that try to find a major career based on the good bosses that you can learn from. I think there is nothing better for younger people now. Choose your career path using and choosing a good boss. Better money in the short run may be a really bad longer term career path. But if you choose a boss that you can learn from, that could let you put your skills, to listen to your ideas, I think you could gain that confidence that we all need to move forward and to continue. Sorry that I got and interrupt your dynamic, but I found that this is really important, breaking that vicious cycle that you need to have a lot of experience to get your first job, and that drives me crazy. So
No, thank you for that additional feedback also. I think we have another question from our participants. Kiara, I don't know if I'm pronouncing your name correctly, sorry. If you want to go ahead and ask your question.
Sure. And yes, it is Kiara. So thank you. Okay, so my question is a bit more specific. So I graduated early last year, and recently I finished 6 months of studying abroad in Uruguay. So now I am 18 and don't know what to do with my life. So I thought, okay, this would be interesting. So for someone who would want to work in foreign affairs, what do you recommend that I do now? Do you think it would be helpful for me to be an intern first, or for me to get other work experience before doing this?
Who would want to go first? Maybe Isabel, because you have the internship.
I can go first. Okay, so there are different types of internship and fellowship processes. Tiana, one of my friends, put some stuff in the chat about becoming a contractor, which I do actually highly recommend. I've been a contractor for 7 years now, different types of contracts, but it was a really good way to kind of get your foot into the department. The barrier to that one is the security clearance. It's hard to know which companies to apply to and where to apply. I think she put Indeed in the chat, but like job sites like Monster, Indeed, clearance jobs, there are some that like are often scouted by government agencies. So you can look up stuff on there. Since you're a little bit younger, you may have to consider something like an administrative assistant, just so you can kind of get your foot in the door and do something a little more entry level, just because you're pretty young, but that doesn't mean anything. Like for us, at least for me, so the internships are kind of interesting. You graduated already, right? You said that you graduated last year.
Yeah, I have my GED already.
Okay, so there are some internship programs that you have to be a current student to apply for them. One of them is Pathways. And so for that one, for your undergrad, you have to have a certain amount of credits on the back end to be eligible to apply to the internship. There are other ones like the recent graduate program where you have 2 years from the period that you graduate to then be eligible for an internship. So there's like a ticking clock from the minute you graduate. There's others called like the PMF program. There's fellowship programs. There are some that like, if you apply to it, like Pickering and Wrangell, they pull from minority and underrepresented groups and they put you through grad school, and then they help you pay for grad school. And then you join the Foreign Service at the conclusion of it. State Department has foreign affairs officer or foreign service officers. So does Department of Agriculture. There are other federal agencies that have foreign affairs or foreign service officers. Karen's probably worked with them in the Peace Corps. We have Peace Corps agencies overseas. I provide security, some of our Peace Corps offices. So there are a lot of options. It's really just about timing and like what exactly you want to do and finding the right opportunity that'll fit your needs. Like if you are the type of like, I don't know where you're located, but I've had some students that have said like, hey, I need to live with my parents for a couple more years. I'm supporting them. I'm working. I don't really see myself going to DC right now, but I know I want to see myself there in a couple of years. Then it's a different kind of conversation, right? Because what kind of opportunities are maybe remote or that are in your local and state government that you could work at now, and then in a couple years put it on your career trajectory to move to DC and be in this area. And maybe in a couple years, with COVID being a thing, maybe there won't be as many need for people in DC. You can just be doing this from wherever you are. We haven't caught up to it yet, at least my agency hasn't, but I'm interested to see what the other panelists have to say and their options too.
Thank you. Does anyone have any other feedback for Kiara?
No one that can compete with Isabel's. I think it was really, really good, because I think my main advice is that if you don't, something that you have, which is a blessed, is that you are young. Being young just means that you could try things, and the consequences of trying something that you didn't like, it may sound like a lot, but when you are young, that diminishes. But also learning what you don't want is very important too. So really, people then learn what they don't like when it's too late. They have a lot of commitments, they cannot change. So being young is a blessing in that sense. So to me, I will say that you may need to have a combination of experience on some of those programs that Isabel said that you could get some, but that also will lead you to make a choice about what do you want to study and continue to study. I think that combination between what you practice and how that affects your decision, what do you want to study, what are the skills that you want to gain with more education. I think that's the key for you. You are finding your path, and finding your path is not a linear thing. And people always in this era of social media always tell Chinese stories, and nobody wants to tell the issues, but the reality is that this process is not linear. So making a couple of mistakes early on, it has no impact at all, but not trying will have long-term impacts on you. So to me, it's trying to find that combination by my own biases, combine working experience with more education, but using the working experience to learn what else do you want to study would be my advice to go.
Thank you, Jose. Karen, any final thoughts?
No, I think Isabel and Jose did an excellent job at covering anything I would have added.
Great, thank you. I think we're running out of time already. Natalie, can you confirm if we have any other final questions or for our participants?
I know there was a question, it kind of tied with the same with Kiara's. They were asking, Nicole Duque asked, what is the best advice you will give to someone who will graduate as an undergrad? So any of our panelists, if they'd like to go ahead and fine tune your answer.
Well, I will tell you a couple of crazy stories when I was an undergrad. I started my own company, a consultant company, and I did crazy stuff, and I was almost in starvation, paying for the office. In that time, you have to have an office. So it's not like everything was virtual. So, but it gave me a lot of, experience, and I met new people, and I have the struggle of doing a consultant work that then people don't want to pay for. So as an undergrad, I think what you need to realize is that you have the whole world in front of you. And that's scary, but it's also wonderful. It's wonderful too, because potentially you could be anything that you want to. And it sounds like cheesy because we understand that there are realities, there are limitations. Oh, of course, if I wish at that time to be Lionel Messi, I will never do it. But being realistic, it means that you could fight for whatever you think you want to do. And sometimes you will realize that whatever you thought you wanted, you didn't want it that much. And things that you tend to overlook, then you find that passion. So to me, is give it a try to whatever you feel passionate about. Look, I tend to work crazy hours, but because I love what I do. So the moment I don't love what I do, I will not work, because slavery stopped a long time ago. The only thing that you need to do is to move to a cheaper place and to have a more modest life. So nobody's forcing you to have a massive salary. What you need is to have passion, because we take a lot of pride being great professionals, if we are fighting lack of diversity, the best thing that we could do is to show that we Latinos, when people open a door, we give the best impression that we can, because that's the only way for us to open the doors for others. Okay, it's not that connection, it's that next time some people see at the State Department a Latino, they will remember what Isabel is doing, and they will have a better experience. Say, okay, let me give the opportunity to another one. And that has been my experience, at least in Maryland. I entered to Maryland, not because in my university in Venezuela was really world recognized. It's because previous Latinos coming from Latin America and different countries, and even from my own university, did an excellent job. So to me is try, you are young, you could try things, look, and then whatever you try, do your best, because you have to be passionate, you need to care enough that will carry that excellency that we all have to drive, because that's the ambassadors that we have to be of other Latinos. We are out to open doors for others because people think excellency when they look at us. That to me is the biggest message that you have to do. Try, but when you try it, you have to mean it. You have to work for it.
Thank you, Jose. I think we only have about 2 minutes left. Are there any final questions from our participants that we would want to take advantage to ask our guests? This is the time. If not, we can go ahead for our closing remarks with Jose.
Which Jose? No, no, thank you everyone for participating. I just want to extend my most sincere gratitude to our panelists. Muchas gracias. Thank you for everyone staying at this long for an hour and a half. So you guys are the real MVPs. Muchas gracias, Jose. Muchas gracias, Isabel. Muchas gracias, Karen. Thank you for sharing your time and your expertise. Just want to remind you that a recording of this webinar will be sent to the email address you used to sign up for this session. Thank you for joining us today again, and thank you for interacting. Also, do not forget to give us a follow. I share our handles, IG, Twitter, and Facebook. So we're here to assist you in any way. I hope, thank you for being part of that during our career week. Have a wonderful day, stay healthy, and go Terps.
Thank you, everyone, for participating.
Thank you, Ligia. Great host.
Thank
Bye,
you.
bye, guys. Thank
Have
you,
a good
Natalie,
night.
Pam.
Thank you.
Have a
Bye.
good night.